With just a few weeks left, just a week left until the August 1st deadline, as we just heard, South Korea's trade officials held talks in Washington, seeking to reach an agreement with the Trump administration. For more on this, we're joined by Professor Park Min-jung, professor at the Department of Business Administration at Kumoh National Institute of Technology. Professor Park, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me today.
So South Korea's trade officials are in Washington to meet with U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick in Washington there. What might have been discussed between the two sides, and what exactly is the U.S. asking from Korea, and what cards does South Korea hold in tariff negotiations?
Yes, I guess the first deadline years for tariffs, Korea and the U.S. are in strategic talks that go well beyond tariff issues, touching on broader economy and geopolitical priorities. So the agenda's items include like the U.S. is expected to push for expanded local production and investment by Korean companies, especially in critical sectors like semiconductors, electrical vehicles, and batteries. This aligns with America's goal of reshoring jobs and securing its supply chains. And also, tariffs issues related to autos and steels will likely be a focal point. So the Trump administration previously threatened up to 25% tariffs, and although deferred, those threats may resurface. So Korea will aim for long-term tariff stability. South Korea, however, holds some strong negotiation leverage in its negotiation cards. First, Korean conglomerates, Samsung, SK, or Hyundai and LG have committed to over $100 billion as in U.S. investments, which Washington cannot easily dismiss. And also, second, Korea plays a critical role in global supply in semiconductor markets. So marketing is indispensable to U.S. tech strategy. So in short, this is not just a trade deal, but it's a multi-layered negotiation involving industrial policy, security alignment, and reconfiguration of supply chains these days.
Right, and based on the trade agreement Japan reached with the Trump administration, what do you think a deal will look like for South Korea?
The recent trade deal between the U.S. and Japan clearly set a very clear precedent. By reducing auto tariffs from 25% to 15%, the U.S. secured $550 billion in Japanese investment and greater agriculture access, demonstrating the tangible economic returns are now standard in negotiations. So this formula will almost certainly apply to South Korea. So the U.S. isn't looking for vague commitments. It wants a very clearly signed agreements that bring in factories, jobs, and long-term supply chain security. Korean companies in semiconductors, batteries, and electrical vehicles will face direct pressure to expand their U.S. footprint. In exchange, Korea may secure tariff relief on core exports like autos and steel, but only if it delivers measurable strategic value.
I see, and you mentioned the auto industry in Japan succeeded in lowering tariffs on their auto imports. Since Japan is one of South Korea's biggest competitors in the auto industry, there are concerns that if Seoul fails to lower its tariffs to a similar level, its competitiveness in the U.S. market could decline. What's your take on this?
Japan's success in reducing auto tariffs from 25% to 50% is a major development, especially considering that Japan and South Korea directly compete in the U.S. auto market, particularly in electric vehicles and hybrids. If Korea fails to secure a similar tariff reduction, Korea's automakers may find themselves at a disadvantage compared to Japan. This pricing gap could quickly erode their market share in the U.S., which is highly sensitive to both cost and brand perception. To stay competitive, South Korea will need to go beyond simply asking for tariff relief. Washington is seeking concrete returns, expanded U.S. production, local job creation, and also secure supply chains. Korea's negotiation strategy must emphasize measurable contributions, not just alliance rhetoric. So finally, we can conclude that with Japan having already secured the favored terms, Korea must act swiftly and strategically to avoid losing ground in a market value where timing and positioning are everything.
I see. And South Korea is also reportedly considering investing at least $100 billion in the United States, backed by major companies here such as Samsung, SK, Hyundai Motors, and LG. What are your thoughts on this?
This South Korea's expanded investment by major conglomerates in the U.S. carries strategic significance beyond mere economic cooperation. First, it serves as a very critical tool to enhance political and diplomatic bargaining power. From the U.S. perspective, such investments contribute directly to key policy goals like job creation and supply chain restructuring and revitalization of domestic manufacturing. So by linking this investment with trade negotiations, Korea can secure more favorable outcomes. And also, it represents an adaptive strategy aligned with the global trend of de-risking from China and also reshoring. By establishing local operations, particularly in high-tech sectors like semiconductors and batteries, Korean firms can reduce regulatory risks and accelerate localization in the long term. So to ease the financial burden of these larger-scale investments, coordinated government support through subsidies, tax breaks, and regulatory aid is essential.
I see. I guess we'll have to see how the negotiations play out. All right, Professor Park, thank you so much for your insight today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.